That day, I was attending the wedding of my elite classmate, James. In the midst of the glamorous atmosphere, as soon as James saw my face, he sneered, "I didn't think a poor guy like you even owned a suit." The other attendees looked at us with disbelief. James had always looked down on me like that. But it was only a matter of time before James' arrogance would come to an end. An astonishing turn of events was waiting for him after this. My name is Michael Rivers, and I'm 35 years old. Currently, I live alone in an apartment. It's not that I'm not interested in women, but there's a reason I can't get married and still don't have a girlfriend. That reason lies in my upbringing. I lived happily with my mother and my sister, Emma, who is 7 years younger than me. My mother had a chronic illness and was physically weak, but she gave Emma and me all the love she could. We were poor and often worried about what we would eat the next day, but as long as the three of us were together, that was enough. To help with the household finances, I started working right after graduating high school. It was because I wanted to help my mother as much as possible. But soon after I started working, my mother's condition worsened. She had to be hospitalized. As a result, I had to take care of Emma while working. From then on, my days were filled with working, taking care of the household, preparing Emma for school, making her lunches, and visiting my mother in the hospital. Honestly, it was tough for me, having just graduated high school, but the smiles on Emma and my mother's faces were my motivation. That said, my body couldn't take it anymore. Thinking that way, I quit my job shortly after joining the company. I transferred to my current job, which offers more flexible hours. I'm sorry for causing you trouble. I want to recover soon and live together with you all again. My mother would always say apologetically. After several months of such days, my mother's condition finally stabilized. She would be able to leave the hospital soon. Just when I thought so, I received a sudden call from the hospital saying my mother was in critical condition. Emma and I rushed to the hospital. As soon as we arrived at the hospital room, Emma grabbed Mom's hand and I called out to her, "Mom, you said you'd get better and we'd live together again." Then, Mom, who had been in a fog, suddenly opened her eyes slightly and looked at me. In a weak voice, she said, "James, please take care of Emma." With those words, she closed her eyes again and passed away to heaven. Neither Emma nor I could stop crying. What are we going to do without Mom? It's so lonely without her. Emma kept crying as she said that. I kept replaying Mom's last words in my head. She used her last bit of strength to entrust Emma to me. I couldn't cry along with Emma right now. I had to protect her. At that moment, I swore to myself that I would. From then on, I always put Emma first. I made sure to attend school events as much as possible and gave her an allowance. It was all to make sure Emma could live without any inconvenience. Because I always prioritized Emma, my own needs came second. Even if I wanted a girlfriend, I didn't have the time. For me, Emma was the most important. Those days continued and Emma graduated from college. She became a respectable working adult and then she moved out to live on her own. I felt incredibly lonely, but it couldn't be helped. Michael, thank you so much for everything. Now, you should think about your own happiness too. Emma said that to me, but for me, happiness was Emma's happiness. As long as she was happy, that was enough. With Emma becoming a working adult, I threw myself into my job more than ever. I worked as a salesperson for a major company. It felt like a dream that I, a high school graduate who joined mid-career, could work at such a big company. I was so grateful to the company for hiring me regardless of my educational background. With a feeling of wanting to give back, I had been working desperately all this time. One day, after a series of similar days, I suddenly received a phone call from Tom, a friend and colleague from high school. "Hey, I'm out drinking with some high school friends. Want to join us?" Tom was inviting me for a drink. Tom was the classmate I was closest to in high school. Even after graduation, we kept in touch regularly and still hang out together. By coincidence, Tom ended up working at the same company as me. After graduating from college, Tom joined a company, making him my junior colleague at work. I had no reason to decline such a sudden invitation from Tom. I immediately said I'd go. Tom sounded happy. When I arrived at the designated bar, Tom was waiting for me outside. "Everyone's waiting for you," Tom said, leading me to the table. A few high school classmates were sitting by the table. Among them, I spotted someone giving me a smug smile. James, why did I have to run into him now? My mood dropped and I felt depressed. "Finally, you made it. It's been a while, Michael." Oblivious to my feelings, James greeted me cheerfully, but I responded in a barely audible voice. "Long time no see. You look well." James burst out laughing. "You haven't changed a bit. Still the same boring guy." Hearing James say that made me shrink back instantly. I knew I was a dull person, but there was no need to say it out loud. Seeing this, Tom spoke up for me. "James, isn't that a bit rude?" James just kept laughing, unfazed by Tom's words. James has always been like this. I started recalling the past like a flashback. My first encounter with James was the worst. It was at the high school entrance ceremony. My mom didn't have much money, so she got me a hand-me-down uniform from a neighbor since new uniforms were expensive. It had been kept so well that you couldn't tell it was second-hand at first glance. I didn't mind that it wasn't brand new. It was good enough for me. When I wore that uniform to the entrance ceremony, James came up to me. "Hey, that uniform's a hand-me-down, right? I can tell just by looking at it." James had this indescribable sneer on his face. But at that moment, I didn't catch on to his snide remark and replied sincerely. "Yay, it's a hand-me-down from a neighbor. It's still in good shape and wearable, right?" When I said that, James started laughing. Then, in a loud voice that echoed through the classroom, he said, "Is your family so poo you can't even afford a new uniform? Get lost, poo kid." Everyone in the class looked at me with pity. I couldn't understand why I had to be subjected to such words from someone I'd just met. But I didn't want to make a scene, so I stayed quiet. From then on, James's attitude towards me got worse. I tried to avoid him as much as possible, but every time he saw me, he'd call me poo kid. This continued until the class changed. When I graduated from high school and finally cut ties with James, I was genuinely happy. So running into him again like this was nothing short of a nightmare. James yelled out to Tom, "There's nothing rude about it. It's the truth. And look at Michael here. He's not even wearing a suit." James pointed out my outfit. "My company doesn't require us to wear suits to work." When I said that, James came out with something astonishing. "What kind of company doesn't require suits? Must be some third-rate place, ho. If you're looking for a new job, I could recommend you as a janitor at my company. After all, my company is top-notch." James said this jokingly. Tom grimaced, but everyone else laughed. I couldn't understand what was so funny. I was fed up with James constantly looking down on others. When both Tom and I remained silent, James started looking smug. "I've got some big news today." Everyone suddenly looked interested. I didn't want to hear any of James's big news. While I was thinking that, James started talking on his own. "I finally got to date the cutest girl in the office." Everyone cheered. "With someone as elite as you, she's gotta be happy." What are they talking about? If I were a woman, I would never want to date a guy like him. Tom seemed to be thinking the same thing and laughed through his nose. James kept talking endlessly about himself. I get so fed up that I decided to leave the bar. "Sorry, I've got plans after this, so I'm gonna head out." When I said that, Tom said something similar and followed me out. Then, in his drunken state, James shouted, "Next time we meet, come in a suit." How much does he need to look down on me to be satisfied? I couldn't help but think that. Outside the bar, Tom apologized deeply to me. "Michael, I'm really sorry. I didn't know James was such a jerk." Tom seemed to feel guilty. But Tom did nothing wrong. Don't worry about it. He's been looking down on me like that since forever. It really pisses me off. Tom nodded. Then life went back to normal. Work is still as busy as ever. I've been working non-stop for the past few days, even giving up my days off. It looks like a big deal is about to be finalized. Then, suddenly, I got a message from Emma. Michael, I have something I want to talk about. Can you make some time? I want to catch up with Emma too and have a good talk. There's so much I want to talk about, like how her work is going and if she's having any trouble living alone. But work won't wait for me. This month might be tough. Sorry. When I said that, Emma sounded sad. But she quickly changed to a cheerful tone. Michael, aren't you working too hard? You should think about your health a little more. Emma said with a smile. She always worries about me like a mother. I promised myself to make time to see her. However, a few months passed without me being able to make time. I felt bad about it, but I couldn't slack off at work. One day, I was walking around town to buy lunch. Usually, I pack leftovers from home. But that day, I decided to buy lunch from a convenience store for the first time in a while. Then, I heard a familiar voice from behind. I turned around, and I couldn't believe my eyes. There stood James. Is your company around here? What a coincidence. Why did I have to run into James again here? They say it's a small world, but I never wanted to see James again. I cursed my bad luck. Yeah, I work right over there. When I said that, James gave his usual sarcastic smile. You're not wearing a suit today, huh? I wonder what kind of company you're working for. I didn't care if James looked down on me, but I couldn't forgive him for insulting my company. I was deeply angered by his words. When I fell silent, James started laughing. A company that hires a poor high school graduate like you must be trash. I had reached my limit. I exploded with anger. I can't believe you're bad-mouthing my company. You don't know anything about it. When I said that, my face red with rage, James laughed again. Are you upset because I told the truth? It's 100 years too early for you to argue with me. If you're so frustrated, why don't you graduate from a good university and work for a top company like me? Well, I think it's impossible for you, though. I was filled with the urge to say more, but I felt it was a waste of time to talk to someone like him. Just as I turned to head back to my office, James suddenly handed me something. I was shocked when I saw it. It was a wedding invitation. I'm getting married soon. I guess I'll invite you too. I was stunned. Why did I have to attend James's wedding? But since I didn't know how to refuse, I reluctantly decided to attend the wedding. I heard the shocking news from Emma that night. When I got home, Emma was waiting for me outside my apartment. She was genuinely surprised to see how exhausted I looked. Michael, you look awful. What's wrong? As soon as I unlocked the door and we got inside, Emma started making me a snack. I'm glad I decided to come over today. You never make time to see me. You must be really tired from work. Emma said this as she served me my favorite omelet. I enjoyed Emma's omelet for the first time in a long while. During that time, Emma watched me with a happy expression. Thanks to Emma, my frustration with James eased a bit. Sorry, Emma. I wanted to see you, but work just wouldn't let up. When I said that, Emma smiled. It's okay. I know how busy you are, but there's something I need to tell you. Emma said this with a serious look on her face. I sensed something unusual. Could it be that you got a boyfriend? I asked nervously, and Emma's cheeks turned bright red. Actually, I got a boyfriend a few months ago, and he proposed to me yesterday. I wanted to tell you first, but you've been so busy. Proposed? I was too shocked to speak. He's really good at his job and popular at his company. I'm sorry I didn't introduce him to you before, but we've already set the wedding date. You'll come to the wedding, right? I was stunned to hear about the wedding. Emma is old enough to get married, and it wasn't surprising to hear about it. And if she loves him, he must be a good person. I was sure of it. I see. Of course I'll attend the wedding. It's my little sister's wedding, after all. When I said that, Emma's face lit up with a big smile. He's really a great guy. I'm excited for you to meet him. Next, it'll be your turn, Michael. Yeah, I guess so. I felt like I was giving away my only daughter. But Emma has her own life. Even if it's lonely, I have to face reality. I'm thinking it's about time I start a family. That thought has started to settle in. There's been a rush of weddings happening around me. I guess I'm at that age. First, I need to make sure Emma doesn't feel embarrassed at her wedding. With that in mind, I spent a bit more money than usual and bought an expensive suit for the wedding. This suit should be fine for James' wedding too. I thought so. And then, the day of James' wedding came. I was walking to the venue with nervous steps. I wondered what James would say when he saw me. Maybe he would make some snide remark. The wedding was being held at the most luxurious hotel in town, known for its banquet hall. When I entered, a grand chandelier hung from above, and a bright red carpet covered the floor. I was overwhelmed by the castle-like atmosphere. As I stood there, more guests began to arrive. Among them was Tom. Why do we even have to be at James' wedding? Tom said, clearly annoyed. As Tom and I were chatting, I saw James greeting various people before walking down the aisle with his bride. James was dressed in a really fancy tuxedo. As soon as he spotted Tom and me, he rushed over. You actually own a suit, you poor thing. James' sudden remark made the surrounding guests burst into laughter. But Tom and I couldn't find it funny at all. I couldn't understand why someone would say something so rude at a celebratory event. I let out a big sigh and started to move toward my seat. Both Tom and James looked at me strangely. Then James started laughing loudly. You can't even read your own name. Your seat is next to Tom's. See, it says Michael. But I ignored him and sat at a seat further back. Tom was visibly shaken. Michael, this is the bride's family's table. Look, it even says Watson here. Tom grabbed my arm with a worried look, probably thinking I had lost my mind. James kept laughing the whole time. Come on, even if you didn't go to college, you can read your own name, right? If you can't read that much, it's embarrassing. So just leave. James looked down on me. Why should I have to leave? I had a very important reason to attend this wedding. So, I decided to reveal my true identity. Rivers is my mom's maiden name. My last name is now Watson. What? James's eyes widened. Then that means James's bride is. Just as Tom was about to say that, Emma, looking beautiful in her dress, called out to me. Michael, I'm so happy you came. Emma had a big smile on her face. Seeing that, James's mouth dropped open even wider in surprise. What? You're Emma's brother? No way. Yeah, that's right. Hearing my words, James turned pale. Emma looked surprised. James, you know my brother? Yeah, we were high school classmates. Emma was surprised but also seemed happy. She probably never imagined that her brother and her husband-to-be were classmates. I was just as shocked when I first found out that Emma's fiancé was James. Yes, the truth is, Emma's important fiancé is James. I found out that fact on the day I received the invitation from James. Emma's name and James's name were clearly written together on the invitation. I couldn't believe such a terrible coincidence and I just sat down in shock. I often thought about telling Emma that James wasn't the person she thought he was. But the wedding date was already set and Emma looked so happy. I didn't have the courage to tell her the truth. James seems to be a good partner for Emma so far and is not my place to interfere. I decided to watch quietly. When my mom and dad divorced, we used my mom's maiden name, Rivers. But when my mom passed away, my dad, who had been living apart from us, offered to help. I didn't really want to rely on him, but for the sake of Emma, who was still in elementary school, I decided to accept his help. At that time, Emma and I decided to change our last name to Watson, which was my dad's last name. However, I had already been living as Michael Rivers, so I continued to use Rivers for work and among friends. Therefore, no one realized that Emma, who went by Watson, was my sister. Are you disappointed to know that my sister Emma is from a poor family? If you're gonna call off the wedding, now's the time. When I said that, James shook his head vehemently. Michael, what are you talking about? James isn't like that, and you're not poor. Emma said, contorting her face. Tom looked at us in disbelief. Then he murmured to himself, I can't believe it. James, who always looked down on Michael for being poor, is marrying his sister. What a coincidence. Emma didn't miss Tom's words and was shocked. Is it true that you look down on my brother for being poor? Emma shouted at James. James turned even paler upon hearing Emma's words. That was back in high school. I don't think that way anymore. You know, we were all too young. Emma frowned at James' words. How can he say that he was too young? He still looks down on me for being poor. It was clear to see that he was lying to smooth things over. But then Tom shouted, What do you mean? You were too young. You were just looking down on Michael a moment ago. Apologize. Tom, being a man of strong principles, couldn't keep quiet. His face was not the usual gentle Tom. Emma's face turned red with anger, and a tense atmosphere filled the room. The other attendees watched in bated breath. Then James shouted angrily, Why do I have to apologize to him? I worked hard, graduated from a prestigious university, and got a job at a big company. I don't need to apologize to someone like him who hasn't put in any effort. Poor people will stay poor forever. James' true colors finally showed. Emma, who was watching, was stunned into silence. But her face looked incredibly sad. Someone who makes her feel this way doesn't deserve to marry her. I felt like I was about to lose my patience. At that moment, a man attending the wedding approached me. Aren't you Michael from In Trading Company? The man, eyes wide, came closer and offered a handshake. When I remained silent, he stared at my face, eyes lighting up. I knew it. You're Michael. I've been wanting to meet you for a long time. Hearing the man's voice, the venue started buzzing with whispers from all directions. In Trading Company. That big corporation. James started laughing loudly in the midst of the commotion. Michael at In Trading Company. No way. There must be some mistake. As James said this and started laughing, holding his stomach, the man turned serious and raised his voice. No, there's no mistake. This man is the famous sales manager who has generated millions of dollars in profit for In Trading Company. He's well known even at my company. Tom, who was watching nearby, started laughing. Hey, Michael. You're even famous in another company. I knew that. I can help it if I'm a workaholic. When I said that, James finally seemed to believe it, his mouth hanging open. How did you manage to get into In Trading Company? Someone like you with just a high school diploma couldn't have gotten in easily. And being a sales manager on top of that, this world must be ending. How can he say something like that? I was too stunned to speak. I couldn't believe someone this rude could become Emma's husband. At that moment, a loud voice echoed through the venue. Ahem. What's all this commotion about? Did my son do something? It was my father. James was sweating bullets. Father-in-law, James said, showed respect to him. Then, the man who had approached Tom and me also started standing straight towards my father. James looked puzzled as he watched the scene. My father yelled at James. You said my son joined In Trading Company without any effort and through dirty tricks. But that's not true. He worked tirelessly to join the company straight out of high school. What do you even know about my son? Tom, explain it to this rude guy. My father said, fuming. Yes, sir. Tom, called upon by my father, responded loudly. James began to look shocked. "Sir," Tom started explaining as instructed by my father. Michael joined the company right after high school to take care of his sick mother and look after his sister, Emma. After his mother passed away, he worked overtime and weekends so people wouldn't think he got special treatment just because he's the CEO's son. So, Michael didn't get here without effort. When Tom finished speaking, James looked at my father in astonishment. "My father-in-law is the CEO of an trading company." My father agreed quietly. "Yes, in fact, the CEO of an trading company, where I work, is my father." That's why Tom and the man who approached me showed respect, deeply knowing my father is the CEO. When my mother fell, my father, who lived separately, reached out to help. He didn't just provide money and a place to live. He also offered me a job. That job was at my father's company. At the time, the sales department was short-staffed, so I was assigned there. I almost gave up many times on the unfamiliar work, but I couldn't betray my father, who had helped me. I wanted to avoid that at all costs. So, I attended computer classes to learn unfamiliar operations and etiquette classes to study sales techniques. I continued sales despite rejections without giving up. My efforts paid off, and I quickly developed sales skills that no one could match. A few years later, seeing my achievements, my father appointed me as sales manager. None of the salesmen around objected to this personnel decision. To boost my father's company, I've been rigorously teaching sales know-how to my colleagues. Because of that, I became very famous. James looks like he's about to faint from shock, but then his eyes light up, and he says something unbelievable. "Why didn't you tell me before?" "So, if I marry Emma, I'll be the next CEO." Everyone present, including my dad and Emma, looked stunned. Why was James talking as if he was going to be my dad's successor? His comment, which seemed to ignore me completely, made me feel irritated. After a moment of silence, my dad and Emma looked at each other and started laughing. If I had revealed that I'm the CEO of a trading company first, greedy guys like you would flock to Emma, right? And I'm never handing this important company over to you. I want Michael to inherit it. Not knowing this, I looked at my dad in surprise. It seemed his decision was firm. Emma, with a cold look in her eyes, spoke up, overlapping with my dad's words. "James, you aren't the person I thought you were. I'm glad I realized it before we got married. We're breaking up." The crowd started buzzing. James turned pale and began to tremble. "Emma, why are you saying this now? We love each other." Emma shook her head at James' words. "I can't be with someone who disrespects my brother. The reason I've grown so much is because of my brother and dad. Please, don't say that. From now on, I'll treat your brother well too. Please reconsider." While James was desperately pleading, Emma started apologizing to the guests. "Everyone, I'm sorry for gathering you here, but this wedding is off. I'll formally apologize later. So let's call it a day." Emma then began walking towards the exit of the venue. James pathetically chased after her. It was a truly ridiculous sight. After that, Emma and James' engagement was officially broken off. For me, it was a happy event. If Emma had married James, I would have had to see the person I despised the most. But Emma scolded me, saying that if I had told her about James' true nature before they got engaged, this wouldn't have happened. My dad, who had felt uneasy about James from the start, was delighted when the engagement was called off. Thus, the storm passed, and peace returned to our lives. A year later, something surprising happened. Emma was getting married again. Given the previous incident, they decided not to hold a ceremony and just register the marriage. But I was concerned about who the groom was. What if he's another guy like James? This anxiety crossed my mind. But it was needless worry. Emma's new husband was Tom. I'm gonna make Emma happy. If it's Tom, your best friend, then I'm relieved. With Tom, who is kind and has a strong sense of justice, I knew Emma would be happy. I felt truly at ease. Someday, I hope to build a wonderful family like Emma and Tom. Seeing them, I couldn't help but feel that way. I'll keep doing my best in both work and personal life from now on. Dear viewers, if you enjoyed the story, please support the video by liking it and leaving a comment. Thank you very much.